Take this. There's so much more, Guardian. I've seen terrible things born out in the darkness. Every moment brings them closer. All ends are beginnings.
Hello and welcome to another PlanetDestiny exotic weapon review. Today we'll be taking a look at the pulse rifle, No Time to Explain. To get this pulse rifle, you have to first collect 3 ghost memory fragments in the heroic daily mission Paradox. A full guide to that is in the description. After a week, another quest will pop up in the tower that has quite a few requirements, which eventually gives you the rifle. If you haven't noticed already, it's strangely reminiscent of the Stranger's Rifle, and its name is derived from one of the most cringe-worthy lines from the vanilla campaign.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain. I will.
Since it's one of the few Year 2 exotics that doesn't have an intrinsic perk on it, we'll start off by taking a look at the muzzle perks. First up is Smooth Ballistics, which gives increased recoil control, but a boost to range. Next is Accurized Ballistics, which gives more range and impact, but increased recoil. And finally, there's Smart Drift Control, which gives more predictable and controllable recoil, with a penalty to range. Personally, I go with Accurized Ballistics in PvP, and Smart Drift Control in PvE. In PvP, Accurized makes it a 2-burst kill on all but the highest armored targets. In PvE, you are really wanting to make use of the Rewind Again perk later on in the tree, so hitting chain precision shots is worth the range hit. It's worth noting that No Time to Explain does have the second highest range stat amongst Taken King pulse rifles, so the range hit is fine. It does have one of the lowest aim assist stats as well, and even if you go for max range to help the aim assist, it'll still be the lowest, so don't fret about the range here, just play around with the middle of the pack stability. Moving on to the first tier perk, we have Full Auto. It worked well on the Stranger's Rifle, and it works good here too. It makes hitting those chain shots really easy, and in PvE, it helps pump damage into those higher health mobs. Also, it has wonderful synergy with the Rewind Again perk, allowing you to have very little actual work to do when you're putting damage into some of the bigger bullet sponges of the game. Moving on, we have the Stat Mod perks. Our first choice is Speed Reload, which will increase the reload speed. Next is Hand Loaded, which increases the range, and finally, Fitted Stock, which increases the stability. Personally, I just go with Fitted Stock, since that does help in pretty much every scenario. Without any recoil modifications, this gun's kick is just enough that it makes landing a full burst difficult, so Fitted Stock really helps out with that. Arguments can be made for Hand Loaded since that increases the range and therefore aim assistance, but I find landing that extra shot because my recoil was easier to control better than missing a shot but having slightly more range. Speed Reload isn't really noticeable, and it isn't going to come into play much either if you're landing criticals. The final perk is Rewind Again, and this gun is pretty much built around it. It causes all precision hits to immediately be returned to the magazine. They're not taken from reserve, but pulled from the ether, so essentially shoot stuff in the head and you'll never need to reload. This is a fantastic perk in pretty much every scenario since at least a few shots from each burst should be precision hits. This extends the magazine size of 24 way past what it should be, and in the right scenario giving essentially infinite shots. So now that we know everything there is to know about the perks, let's take a look at this gun in PvE and PvP. So for PvE, the big question I got was, why would I ever use this gun over Bad Juju? They're essentially the same thing! Well, no. Bad Juju is a superior weapon for killing tier 1 mobs since you never have to reload it provided you kill stuff in one clip. Where No Time to Explain excels is pumping damage into a boss. As I've said before, the exotics in Taken King are not there to define your loadout, but to enhance it. Let's look at the raid for some examples here. In the War Priest, most people will be using Black Spindle as their exotic. You can also do some strats with Touch of Malice and a Defender Blessing of Light Bubble, and Sleeper Simulant is another popular choice. Using No Time to Explain as filler for the Raid Sniper, while it isn't going to outdamage those other weapons I mentioned, it's still a decent alternative if you don't have those. Letting off a magazine from the Raid Sniper, then switching to No Time Explain for about 5 seconds, and then back to Raid Sniper. The Rewind Again perk will allow you to put endless rounds into the War Priest, so even if you're out of sniper ammo, you can use it as a poor man's Touch of Malice. In the Golgoroth fight, Black Spindle reigns supreme, no question about that. The only other fight in the raid where No Time to Explain might be useful is the Oryx fight. Never having to reload allows you to pump consistent damage into the ogres. Use it with the raid sniper so you can weave in consistent, steady damage in between your bursts. This gun is a very reliable primary. If you go for smart drift control and fitted stock, you can essentially go for long periods of time without reloading, provided your aim is true. On bosses where you can reliably land crits, you're going to have really high sustained DPS. It still won't be out-damaging secondary weapons or heavies, but when Valis is at half health and your sniper and machine gun don't have ammo, this will be a solid way to keep the damage up. Moving on to PvP, No Time to Explain is another great weapon in the current lineup of pulse rifles. If you enjoyed using the Stranger's Rifle, then you should be right at home using this gun. The problem is, well, it just isn't the same. The chief complaint about this weapon is one that the original Bad Juju had as well. In PvE, this really isn't going to be an issue because enemies are predictable and not going to move too much. In PvP, you have to track your targets moving way more, and there lies the problem. You can't do that with this gun. The new side plates and holographic sight get in the way of tracking side-to-side movement. If you fire a burst, chances are players are going to move shortly after being hit. Combine that with the nature of pulse rifle recoil, and all of a sudden you have no idea where your enemy is after the first or second burst. You have to stop shooting just to find them again and try to land that final shot. Here's a side-by-side comparison of Stranger's Rifle and No Time to Explain. Most people thought the muzzle flash was the issue causing target acquisition to be difficult. It isn't the core issue, but it's still part of it. So how does it perform if you can actually hit your target? Wonderfully! It's probably my favorite pulse rifle to use because I was such a big fan of the Stranger's Rifle. You won't be getting much use out of the Rewind Again perk though. It's nice knowing a shot or two will get refunded, but don't count on it to help you win fights. The lore actually has some pretty cool stuff on the gun too. The didn't bother not in the game version of the lore is essentially that Praetus timepiece Stranger's Rifle and this gun are the same rifle, but from different points in the timeline. The changes to this rifle from the Stranger's Rifle model are, in my opinion, all bad. The holographic sight on the Stranger's Rifle gave it a real sense of depth when aiming down the sights. The one on No Time to Explain feels bulky and in the way. The plating added to the sight of the rifle amplifies this effect and gets in the way of tracking your target, but I've already gone over that. The only thing that really feels like it was kept the same was the sound of firing. This is one of the things that drew me to the Stranger's Rifle in the first place, since it was just an interesting sound compared to the other weapons. I really want Bungie to take another look at this gun. It has such potential to be a unique exotic weapon if they just fix that issue with the sights. The ability to pump damage endlessly into a target's crit spot is fantastic on a primary weapon like this. In PvP, even if they fix the sights, there's simply too many solid options for legendary or other exotic pulse rifles to warrant using this. While it can 2-tap someone in the right circumstances, I would much rather have Bad Juju's instant reload or Red Death's health regen. I hope you guys found this review helpful. Let me know what you think of No Time to Explain in the comments. This has been Patrick Casey with PlanetDestiny, your guide to the Destiny universe.